Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new Elder Scrolls Online build video with me, Sherman. Today guys, we are taking a look at a new build with an old name, the Druid. Now, I am going to give you a little bit of kind of reasoning why I made this build more magic based than I did with the other one, and that's because the other one I'm changing the name to, but it's to fit the persona, if you will, of the build. And the same thing here, it's just to fit the persona of the build in the way it works. So druids in most fantasy type stories are really elemental based. They're really based around nature, and that's where I really wanted this build to shine, and I always wanted this build to shine, but it never really, there was never really anything there that fit that kind of structure, if you will. But there was stuff that fit the idea. Now we got stuff that fits the structure. So let's go ahead and get into it, starting with what we are. We are an orc warden with this build. Now, you don't have to be an orc. You can be any race, really. Orc is just what I chose because I felt like it really fit the conceptual idea of it. Of, you know, orcs are more tribalistic, shamanistic, that kind of thing, and Druid would play into that, along with even the Bretons and the Weird, or even Wood Elves and their kind of thing, or even Dark Elves living in Morrowind. You really have a good mix, and any race really could play off of this idea, because Druids are nature-based beings, so it's just anything could really do it. So let's go ahead and get started. Magicka, 64 points, and the reason for that is you want a good Magicka pool. You want a good Magicka resource. So this gives you 31,758, 20k health, 19k stamina, with a 1,024 mag recovery, 331 health recovery, and a 655 stam recovery. Now remember, this is an orc, this isn't a high elf, this isn't a wood elf, and I'm not using anything to boost my max magicka. That's just my flat max magicka with the way the build works. 32,000 almost. That's really good. Now, if you were a Breton, you would actually have 32,000 with this, which would even amplify it even more. So, spell damage, 1883, weapon damage, 1793. Don't really be too concerned by that. It's the way the build set up, because watch what happens when I swap bars. They change. Spell critical 45.7%, weapon critical 28%, spell resistance 13,154, physical resistance 12,494. Now a lot of people are going to ask me before I get any further, Sherman, what kind of build is this? Because I don't really see a distinction here. I don't see a tank, healer, DPS kind of thing. It's kind of like a mix, really, between a DPS and healer. But I'm not going to call it a hybrid healer, because it can play either route. It can play damage dealer or it can play healer. Alright, it can also tank really well. Next up, Thief Mundus Stone. This is to increase your spell crit rating. This is really important. We also have Tri-Stat Food to increase max health, magic, and stamina. Again, I have my reasons for using this. You don't have to use this food if you don't want to. I use it for my reasons. Moving on to the food and drink. So, 2 drinks on this one. The Tri-Stat Pots, this is what I use most of the time. When I'm soloing or I'm off doing... you know, playing even in a group, sometimes I'll use this, and it depends on which role I'm playing. Primarily, though, spell pots, this is going to give you that major recovery, or magic recovery. It's going to give you major sorcery, major prophecy, increasing spell damage, and spell critical. You don't really need those either. You're a warden, you actually have access to those abilities to give you those buffs, and other benefits. So, moving on to sets, and this is where things get really interesting, because we're not using a monster set. We're actually using 2 5-piece sets and Master Maelstrom combination. And that's what makes this build so unique, and so much more unique than other things. that I've done in the past. Now, you could use a monster set if you wanted to. Which one would really be up to the person controlling the build. But I find this combination works really well. And it's not going to be an easy one to get because of the specifics. So, but let's go ahead and take a look at this. So starting with our main 5-piece, we are using Combat Physician. Now, Combat Physician is just a really good all-around support set. Because of how it works. It's not only is it supportive, it's also damage dealing. So it really plays into that idea of how Druids are. Druids are damage dealers with support capabilities, so having that good combination, again, really builds on that. So 2-piece Max Magicka, 3 and 4-piece Spell Crit, 5-piece, when you critically heal yourself or an ally, you grant your target a damage shield that absorbs 9,507 damage for 6 seconds. That effect can occur every 6 seconds. So no matter what, you're going to be applying damage shields. A lot of them. As long as you critically heal. Now you guys are wondering, how am I going to critically heal? Well, you'll see. The next set we're running is a new set from Greymoor. This is the Winter's Respite set. And this is a fantastic set. I love that the devs made this really unique magic set that not only supports but also increases your capabilities of resource management along with damage in a unique way. So 2-piece Mag Recovery, 3-piece Max Magicka, 4-piece Max Magicka, 5-piece. Casting abilities that leave an effect on the ground will create a circle of healing frost for 10 seconds. You and your allies restore X amount of health, 2,593, and this is also based on your healing effectiveness and everything else. Every 1 second while inside the circle. This effect can occur once every 10 seconds. So every 10 seconds, this will be getting applied. Well, guess what? The abilities that you use to keep this applied last 10 seconds. So it's a really good trade-off. You're going to have this up 100% of the time. It's that good. And we have this on the jewelry and the shoulders and the helm. The other is on the 5-piece body, and you can really mix and match this set how you want because you're not using a monster set. Now, if you are using a monster set, you are going to want to use the weapons of Winter's Respite, and you're going to want to use the body as Combat Physician with the monster set of your choice. And monster set, you're going to wind up going a full... you're going to be a 5-1-1 setup, so you're going to be 5 light, 1 medium, 1 heavy. This is completely a light armor build, and it works out really well. So on the helm and the legs, I would suggest using Invigorating. Now I have Divines here, and that's because doing some testing for my own playability, I find that I only need the 1 Invigorating. Having an extra one would help with recovery, but again, it comes down to the person's playability and understanding of a build. So if you're new to the build, Invigorating on both is going to be what you're going to want to get on the legs and the helm. And then on the chest, Nirnhone or Reinforced. Reinforced is 1694 or 1684 or something like that to 1697 golded out. So it's a good trade-off. Now on the big pieces, we are using Tri-Stat runes. And this is just to give us a good equal amount of Magicka health and stamina, so we have those resources available for different things. The other one is the small pieces. We are using Divines Max Magicka, and this is to maximize our Magicka pool, so we get that Max Magicka capability. That's the other reason why we put 64 points into our Magicka. Now, moving on to the jewelry. Again, you guys are going to see a real similarity to what I normally do, 2 Tri-Rune, 1 Infused, and that is what I'm doing here as well. So 2 Tri-Rune rings to give you that same almost equivalent amount of resources in Max Magicka health and stamina as you do from a Tri-Stat enchant. And then the last thing is the jewelry necklace piece, which is also infused. But this one, we're using a reduced spell cost enhancement. And there's a reason for it. It plays off one of our set pieces. One of our set pieces actually has a high cost ability that we use to activate it. So having reduced spell cost actually saves us resources with our recovery rate already being really high. So it works out really well for this. And it also saves you resources on all the other abilities, because that's 324 magicka you're saving per cast. So it's kind of nice. And then moving on to the weapons, our first weapon, our main hand weapon, is a Master's Ice Staff. Now, before we get too far, understand there's a reason why I'm using an Ice Staff on this versus a Fire Staff. Okay, Wardens get a natural affinity towards ice magic damage. They get a 10% increase to ice magic damage and magic damage. So anything you use that can give you that kind of amplified ability, it's good to use. So using an ice staff, a lot of people are going to be like, well, it's a tank weapon. You're going to sacrifice that tank, you know, the one passive. No, you're not. You're going to take that passive. You're just not going to be heavy attacking with the ice staff. And if you do, it's basically to off tank adds, so you can gather them up and help the tank and stuff like that. You are a group support damage dealer, so having the ability to do things to help the group really plays well into it. So the nice thing about this weapon, though, is the 2-piece bonus it offers. Now, this is an imperfect version. I did this on purpose. I didn't want to show you the perfected version and be like, you got to get this. I wanted you to be like, hey, here's what you can start with to move up to that perfected version, and that is the Master's Ice Staff in normal version. So you can get this from running the normal Dragon Star Arena. It's not going to be easy to get. It will be challenging, but it's well worth the reward. Reduces the cost of Destructive Touch by 10%. Now, this doesn't matter the morph you take of Destructive Touch, it will reduce the cost by 10%. And it increases the spell damage by 600 for 4 seconds after activating it. When we get to Destructive Touch in the skills, you guys will see how low cost it is now with that 10% and that extra 324 from the ring up here. So it works out really well. Now, you do only get spell damage for 4 seconds, but that 4 seconds can mean life or death. So it can either mean more damage output, which could save your life, or it could mean a much more powerful heal, which will save your life and your groups. So this is a really good alternative set for a healer to use because of that 600 spell damage. And it really comes down to those oh crap moments. But this isn't a healer. Remember, this is a support build, more or less. But it can play anything you want it to. If you want to be a tank, a healer, damage dealer, you can really play it as any one of those without having to change anything. You just have to change your skills and how your skills work. The next one is a Maelstrom staff, which now you can get on normal as well. And the reason for the Maelstrom staff is, of course, the 2-piece bonus. Now, these are both, the way they're set up. This one's Nirnhoned with a weakening enchant. Now, you guys are going to wonder why a weakening enchant. If you're tanking with this build, you don't have weakening or minor maim. This will give you minor maim. And it'll give it to you all the time you're on the front bar. So every ability you use on the front bar is going to be applying weakening. The only thing is that it will only apply it every 10 seconds. So it's a good way to keep that incoming damage down for you and your allies, which again makes support. On the back bar, we're using infused with a weapon spell damage. And this plays into our build also because it gives us that amplification of both weapon and spell damage, so we can use some stamina-based abilities if we need to, like, say, Resolving Vigor or Echoing Vigor. Whatever morph you might use of Vigor, you could use because now you have that extra weapon damage to apply to that healing capability of it. So you can play this using stamina for healing for your group. It's one of those trade-offs. But the 2-piece bonus is really good. Your light and heavy attacks deal additional 1353 damage to enemies in your wall of elements. So this is, again, you have that I want to boost my damage for this reason or this reason, that situational purpose. And this one you have that I want to boost my damage all the time. So you're constantly going to have this trade-off of how you play, but you're going to have this really good trade-off of how you use the tools. All right, moving on to skills now. And again, I will tell you guys this now, I have all class passives and abilities unlocked for a purpose, and that is so I have access to more tools, so I can play this build more situationally. I have access to more things. And I'll get to more of that at the end of the video. I'm going to go into a little bit more explanation of why I do this, and giving the understanding it takes a long time to do it. So, starting with our primary skills that we do use, though, starting with our main bar, we have Crushing Shock. Now, this is a really cool ability because it does Flame Frost and Shock damage. It does all 3 damage types, and it has a chance to apply Burning, Concussed, or the off-balance one. So you have 3 different ways of looking at this as a damage thing. Now, its percentage chance of applying those is really low, but this is your primary spammable. You're going to be using this a lot. The other thing is that enemies hit while casting. It doesn't matter whether they're Magicka or stamina based, as long as they're activating an ability, it will interrupt them and set them off balance and stun them for 3 seconds. This is a great CC ability. It's a great, like, oh, this guy's casting, no you're not, boom, done, you're out, for that ability. So it helps out really well. It does not work against boss mobs. It only works against elites and normal mobs. The next ability we have is Frost Reach, which is a great ability. It does damage up front and damage over time. You remember how I said that thing about the one staff, the Master Staff, how it gives you 4 seconds? This has a 10-second damage over time. That 4-second boost for X amount of spell damage is really good for when you activate this, because the next ability you're going to be activating is your Fissure, which takes 4 seconds to activate. Or 3 seconds to activate. Almost 4 if you include the light attacks in between. So when this fires off, it will have that 600 magic damage applied to it, which is great. That's extra damage. That's really what you're looking at, is how can I maximize my damage potential with certain abilities. The other thing that's nice about this ability, of course, and we'll get to that in a second. So this does damage up front, it does damage over 10 seconds. Deep Fissure does magic damage, and it takes 3 seconds to activate. It has a 20 by 7 meter range. Anything it hits takes magic damage, but it also applies Major Breach to them for 6 seconds. So if you have a good group of enemies grouped up and you drop this on them, every single one of them is going to get Major Breach, that reduced spell resistance by 5,280 for 6 seconds, which is awesome. But remember, a lot of the times you're fighting bosses in dungeons, and that's where your main focus of your rotation usually is against bosses. So when you're fighting bosses, you want this to have that breach already, but you don't have access to it all the time, right? Not normally. Now you do, because of the way this build works. The next ability we have is a really cool damage AoE heal. So this heals you and for X amount of health up front, X amount of health every second for 5 seconds, and anyone within 12 meters of you that is missing health will also get healed for a certain amount of health. Now remember, anytime you heal yourself or anyone else, you get you have a chance of applying a damage shield, right? To one or the other. This applies that as well, so it's really good. And then while this effect persists, the winds pulse outwards, dealing X amount of frost damage every second to nearby enemies. So this is a really good close-up AoE CC, or damage ability, heal, and possible CC. Because being a Warden, all your ice abilities give you the icy aura. Or not icy aura, sorry, glacial presence. Increases your chance to apply shield status effects with winter embrace abilities by 200%. Enemies and allies who are have recently been chilled take 10% more critical damage and healing from you. So you can actually increase your healing effect against your allies, and you can reduce or increase the damage against your enemies. So this is actually really cool that you have this. You also have that 10% from piercing cold to frost damage. So it applies to both. And it does stack. So you get this really cool combination. And I really like the way that works. So with Arctic Wind, it's a really nice burst heal. It's a really nice damage over time, especially when solo playing. And then next ability we have, and this is optional, really depends on your group, but I like using it, and that is Elemental Susceptibility. The reason I like using Elemental Susceptibility on this build is because of the fact that Major Breach is hard to come by in any group setting. So even though I can apply Major Breach every 6 seconds, I have to keep that applied non-stop. I have to constantly cast Deep Fissure every 6 seconds. With this, I don't. I apply it to an enemy, and I forget about it. The reason why is anytime it takes damage, that Major Breach is reapplied. It is refreshed for 20 seconds. So every time that somebody hits that enemy, it's just constantly keeping it reapplied for 20 seconds. It has an infinite lasting effect while in combat, because as long as you're doing damage, it's constantly applied. This gives you that Major Breach, not only for when you're in combat with that enemy, but also for the one high damage ability you have. And it's non-stop. So it's really good. Next ability we have is our ultimate, starting with this one, and I love this one. It's Eye of Frost. This one creates a cataclysmic storm above you that builds for 2 seconds and then lays waste to all enemies nearby, dealing X amount of frost damage every second for 7 seconds. The only thing I don't like about this this ultimate is its cost is 250. It has a very high cost of ultimate, but it's a very powerful damage ability. But it's not as powerful as our other ability on the back bar, other ultimate. So moving on now to the back bar. The first ability we have is Winter's Revenge. Now this is a placeable, so I want to show you what I mean by that. So when you go to cast this, you have to place it. There is another version of this that it casts around you, but I like using this because I can set it, and when I do, guess what? Whoever is inside of it is getting healed. Do you see that? So I can set this right underneath the feet of my allies, and instead of just doing damage, it heals. So the thing that's great about this ability is it does do damage over 12 seconds. So it does 1977 damage, but that varies based on your spell damage and everything. Over every second for 12 seconds. Enemies hit are overcome with bitter cold, reducing their movement speed by 30% for 3 seconds. And this ability has a higher chance to apply chilled status effect. That means minor maim. Reduced damage incoming. Along with that. So it's a really good ability to use for that purpose. Hey, I want to get a minor maim on these guys before they get close enough to us where they can start doing damage. And the chilled status effect does only last for 3 seconds, but if it has a higher uptime, so it has a higher chance of keeping it applied. So it definitely will keep it applied more often than you think, and almost has 100% uptime in some cases. Next ability, Blockade of Storms. Now this is a really cool one because it does shock damage every second while the enemies are in it, and it has a chance of setting concussed enemies off balance. Now if you concuss an enemy, that means you affect them with shock damage. That means they can be set off balance. Next ability we have is a really good dot ability, and that is Fetcher Inflection. This deals 11,000 damage over 10 seconds. Every second cast, this ability deals 50% increase in damage, and the Fetcher flies rip through the enemy's flesh, afflicting them with minor vulnerability for the duration, increasing their damage taken by 8%. Remember when I told you this is a damage, like kind of a mix between damage and healing? This is where the damage really amplifies. That 8% damage minor vulnerability does help in the long run. But it's the next two abilities that really play well with this build. The next one is called Lotus Blossom. Now this one, embrace the Lotus Blessing, causing your light attacks to restore X amount of health, and your fully charged heavy attacks to restore X amount of health to you and nearby allies for 20 seconds. You gain Major Prophecy, increasing your spell critical rating by 2191 for 20 seconds. Now, the main reason why we use this is the prophecy, of course. But that extra way of keeping yourself alive and your allies alive is also a benefit, because you're going to be on your back bar heavy attacking, your front bar light attacking. So you're constantly giving out health. So it's a really good, like I said, this build is all about not only dealing damage, but also supporting your group. Because you've got shields that you apply to your group whenever you heal them. You've got this mystic AoE heal that comes out of your ice abilities or your ground effects abilities that heals. So you got all these different tools that support while dealing damage. So you've got this really good trade-off. The next thing we have is Blue Betty. This gives you resources back over 25 seconds, almost 5k. It also grants you Major Brutality and Major Sorcery, so you get weapon and spell damage increased by 20%, and then every 5 seconds, the net removes 1 negative effect from you. Which, for 25 seconds, that's 5 negative effects. It's really powerful. Last but not least is our primary ultimate, and this is the one you're going to use the most. And that is Permafrost. Now this deals frost damage every second for 12 seconds to enemies around you, and reducing their movement speed by 70% and applying the chilled status effect. You and nearby allies gain major protection, reducing your damage taken by 30%. Now this does cost 200 ultimate, which is it can be rough to get, but with the way this build works, you actually generate ultimate pretty fast. Not super fast, but fast enough to where you can get this off roughly every 20 to 30 seconds, depending on how much of ability casting you're doing and how much light and heavy attack you're doing, that kind of stuff. It does have a 10 meter radius, and it has a 12-second duration with a 200 ultimate cost. It is a very nice ability because it does follow you as well. Alright, now that I've shown you guys the abilities, we're going to go over the champion points. Now, champion points are set up in a way that fit my playability of the build, and not necessarily, say, a hardcore in-game raider, or maybe somebody who does trials a lot, or somebody who does dungeons a lot, or somebody who even focuses on PvP. This is more of a universal, all-around kind of setup to where you can just play the build. So, taking a look at our red tree, we have 56 in Ironclad. This reduces damage taken from direct damage attacks by 20%. Now remember, for wearing light armor, you do get increased spell resistance. So we only have 8 points in the spell shield, and this increases your spell resistance by 11. And that's basically so you can balance out your spell resistance to your physical resistance. You don't want your physical resistance outdoing your spell resistance too much. You want them more equalized, so that's why we do this. Now, you can take this down to 4 points if you want to, and it will put you on a more equal playing field, like almost 12k, 12k, but I like the way this works a little bit better for myself. Moving on to the middle tree, we have 31 into Thick Skin. This reduces damage from direct damage attacks by 13%. We also have 30 into Light Armor Focus, which does require you to wear 5 pieces or more of light armor to get the advantage. So we get 2,692 extra physical resistance added to our character with the 30 points. So this just increases our survivability. Moving on now to Hardy, we have 43 points in here, and this reduces damage taken from physical poison and disease damage by 10%. We also have 43 into Elemental Defender, increasing Flame Frost, Shock, and Magic damage by 10%. And then moving on to the final red tree, we have 40 into Bastion. This increases the effectiveness of your damage shields. This doesn't apply to just any damage shields. All damage shields are affected by this. So you get 16% more power out of them, even the ones like your light armor skill, Harness Magicka, which people say, well, it doesn't really affect it. It does. This goes to 10k, and it lasts for 6 seconds, and the shield strength is capped at 50% of your max health. So even at 50% of my max health, I'm still taking advantage of that 16%, just not by as much. Not with like I am with the set. Next one we have is Quick Recovery, 19 points. This increases your healing received by 5%. This just makes it easier for you to stay alive. because the more healing receive you have, the better off you are at gaining heals at a higher amount. So 5% extra healing is going to keep you going. Moving on to the green tree, we have 40 into Warlord. This reduces your break free cost by 16%. We have 16 into Sprinter, reducing sprint cost by 10%. 16 into Bashing Focus, reducing bash cost by 10%. And then moving on over here, we have 43 into Mooncalf. Now this increases stam recovery by 10%. And then we have 75 into Arcanist, increasing mag recovery by 14%. Now I will say this, if you are using a Resto Staff instead of a Lightning Staff, which you can do, Tenacity, 75, 43 into Arcanist. The reason for that, you're going to get way more out of that Resto Staff in resource return than you will out of recovery, period. But it's a nice combination in both. Moving on. Tumbling, 40, this reduces your dodge roll cost by 16%, and then 40 into Shadow Ward, reducing your block cost by 16%. Moving on to the middle tree, the final tree, the blue tree, we have 43 into Bless. This increases your healing done by 10%. We also have 56 into Elfborn. This increases your critical damage and critical healing with magic abilities by 20%. 56 into Elemental Expert, increasing Flame Frost, Shock, and magic damage by 12%. Now remember, this amplifies your frost damage and magic damage by 22% because you get an extra 10% for being a Warden. Moving on, we have 35 into Staff Expert. This increases your light and heavy attacks with Destruction and Resto Staffs by 20%. And then 40 into Mastered Arms, increasing your damage done with direct damage attacks by 16%. Moving on to the final tree, we have 40 into Thaumaturge. Now this increases your damage done with damage over time effects by 16%. So it just helps amplify, again, your damage over time. But you're already getting a high amplification of Frost and magic damage, so this just amplifies it even more. Right, now that I've shown you guys that, you guys probably want to see what this thing looks like in action. Now you notice I haven't talked about all the skills I have unlocked and everything, because I'm going to leave that for the end of the video, guys, where I'm going to go into a few more explanations about why I do that, the reasoning, everything, which will make the video a little bit longer, but I figured this way you guys could see the gameplay, the skills and abilities that I use normally. And then you guys can go from there. So all dead. Now the nice thing about this build is you got so much healing coming in that you really don't need a shield, but that shield's there, and it's more of like one of those, oh crap, I've got, I'm taking a lot of damage, now I've got this way of kind of getting out of it and everything. So and yes, you saw me heavy attack there. I'm playing by myself, I can heavy attack. If I'm in a group, you don't want to heavy attack. Alright, so now that we're at the boss, and everybody loves this boss, because he's so fantastic, let's go ahead and get right into it and kick his butt. And as you can see, like I said, this build has a lot of, healing, so you get this really good kind of, mix of stuff. So I'm gonna stand here, I'm gonna block so you guys can see. I'm also gonna cast my heal again, and now you'll see I'm out of magicka, so I'm gonna use my potion. I'm gonna block this one because when I use my lightning staff to block, it takes stamina. When I use my ice staff to block, it uses magicka. So you have this, again, this really cool trade-off of stuff. Now I'm going to go ahead and let him kill me. I'm just going to get one more good heavy attack on him because he just irks me. And that's if he can kill me, because he has to go through lots of shields and stuff. Alright. But that's pretty much how the build works. It's very powerful in what it does. It does do a decent amount of damage, like I said, and if you can keep a good rotation between the destructive touch and the crushing shock, you can actually get a few crushing shocks off pretty well. What I like to do is I like to do the destructive reach, then the chulks, then my polar winds, and then I like to make sure I have the elemental susceptibility applied, and then I go back, I do destructive touch again, then I do 3 crushing shocks with light attacks in between. So I'll do light attack, crushing shock, light attack, crushing shock, or sorry, yeah, like that, 3 times so I can get the damage out of it. But that's it for the build and how it works. Now, going back and talking about the skills and why I unlock them. A lot of times, you know, you're in situations where you don't know what you need, what you don't need, what's available to you, what's not available to you. So having the ability to access more skills by unlocking all the skills for your class gives you more tools at your fingertips. The same thing applies to your weapon skills. The same thing applies to armor skills. The same thing applies to all your other skills. It just gives you situational play that allows for more flexibility, more freedom in how you play. And everyone's going to have their own choices in what skills they want to use or what skills they don't want to use. Like I use Elemental or Eternal Guardian. Somebody else might want to use the other one. It really comes down to your choice in what you like to play and how you like to use it. I like Eternal Guardian because if it does go down, it will come back once it dies. So it can be killed once per minute, which is fine. It dies, it comes back. And that's only in Overland. In Dungeons, it'll never die, so it'll always be there. So you've got, like, again, you've got this nice kind of magical balance between your character and nature. The other abilities is like Screaming Crypt Racer. I might switch this out for Crushing Shock. Then we have Deep Fissure. We have the Fetcher Infection. We have Blue Betty. We have the Birds of Prey. On Green Balance side, if I want to play healer, I have Healing Thicket. I have Enchanted Growth. I have Budding Seeds, Leeching Vines, Lotus Blossom, and Bursting Vines. If I want to tank, I have access to Expansive Frost Cloak, which applies to my whole group, giving us all major resolve, increasing physical and spell resistance by 5,280. Then we have Winter's Revenge and Polar Winds. We have Shimmering Shield, which is a great thing for dealing damage back to your enemies, or not back to your enemies, but giving yourself ultimate. It'll restore magicka, and it gives you major heroism. So it's a really great ultimate gen builder for when you're tanking a dungeon, so you can keep up permafrost a lot easier. We also have Frozen Gate to pull enemies in. Destruction Staff, Eye of the Storm, Crushing Shock, Elemental Blockade, Destructive Reach, Elemental Susceptibility, and Pulsar. All great abilities that can be used on either side of the bar. So you can use Pulsar on the lightning bar or the ice bar. Either way, it's just a really good damage thing. And you can also learn the rest of stuff. Light armor, all the passives, plus you're going to want to get 1 or 2 of the shield's dampening magic or harnessing magic. I like harness magic because it gives me a way of getting resources back when I'm tanking. Because when I'm tanking, I'm using a lot more resources. Next, medium armor, top 2, bottom 1. You don't need these other ones unless you're going to be wearing medium armor. And then the same thing with heavy armor, the top 3. World skills. Again, you can be a vampire with this. You can be a werewolf, your choice. It really doesn't matter. But Soul Magic, Shatter Soul, Consuming Trap, and all 3 of these are really good. Guild skills. Fighter's Guild. I do take Fighter's Guild abilities. Even though I'm a Magicka-based class, having some stamina-based abilities can come to my advantage in different situations. Like Dawnbreaker Smiting gives me a really good stun CC, plus a large AoE. And since it's an ultimate, it's based off my max stat. So it's built off of my magic damage and magic crit. So this will play off of that either way. So it's really good. Next, we have Silver Leash, another pull for enemies if I'm tanking or whatever, and it does do a decent amount of damage, also snares them a little bit. We also have Ring of Preservation if I need more healing. We have Evil Hunter, and it also gives 8% damage reduction to my group, and minor endurance, increasing their stam recovery by 10%. Evil Hunter is here if I need more weapon crit to increase critical healing. For stamina side, we have Barb Trap for if I want more DPS, if I want minor force. Mage's Guild, all the abilities of course. Ice Comet, really good damage over time plus CC. Inner Light, another great way of boosting my max magic if I need to. Structured Entropy, a great damage over time plus a heal. Then we have Scolding Ruin, another great damage ability and kind of a CC, but really depends on how you look at it. It's just a really good damage ability, in my opinion. And then we have Balance. It's another way of tanking, a way of getting major resolve that increases spell and physical resistance at the sacrifice of Magicka, which can make it really hard to play when you're playing a Magicka build. Psijic Order. Precognition, really great time jump ability, great for PvP, also can be good in PvE in some cases. Borrowed Time, another great CC ability. Then we have Elemental Weapon, we also have Race Against Time, Min Spirit, and Deep Thoughts. Moving on to Undaunted, Overflowing Altar, Tingling Webs, Inner Rage for another ranged taunt besides our Ice Staff, Bone Surge, and Energy Orbs. All this stuff plays into how you choose to play the build. Assault, Resolving Vigor, and Razor Caltrops. Now you can take Echoing Vigor, which is going to be more group related. This is more single target related, but it's still a lot of health over time. Support, we got Reviving Barrier, Efficient Purge, and Mystic Guard. Now the reason for Caltrops is it does apply Major Breach and Major Fracture. Or Major Fracture, sorry. And we have a way of applying Major Breach. Racials, remember, Orc. So we get Brawny, we get increased stamina by 2,000, unflinching rage, extra health, plus we get healing whenever we do damage. And then we have Swift Warrior, which increases our weapon damage by 258, which we don't really need to worry about, but that's why our weapon damage is more in line with our spell damage. But we also get that reduced sprint cost and increased movement speed when sprinting, so it's nice. Crafting, Alchemy, Medicinal Use, and Provisioning, Gourmand, and Connoisseur. You're going to want to make sure you get these ones. But remember, everything you do to unlock these skills for your character takes time. It's not something you're going to be able to unlock them all and be like, okay, I'm ready to play. Or now I'm ready to play. Unlock them as you progress. Earn the skills. Even after you hit CP levels, go out and earn more skill points. You can get skill points through a multitude of different things. Completing dungeons, finding sky shards, completing main quests in campaigns, and campaign adventures are like the main story adventures to the locations you're in. So like if you're playing through Elsewhere has like 6 skill points you can earn from the main quest. So that's another thing. It's really important to get these skills and these other abilities to play your character. Don't rely on just this. Rely on what your character has available, because that's what's going to make your character really good overall, and it's going to allow you to have more playstyles and more ways to play. But unfortunately, guys, that is the end of this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope it was a little bit more informative than my other ones in how I explain things, and if it was, let me know in the description below. It'd really help me out. But other than that, if you guys like this video, you guys know what's coming next. Go ahead and hit that like button. If you guys want to see more videos by me, you can subscribe. Other than that, I want to thank you all for watching. Until next time, have a wonderful day, and this guy might see you in game. Bye.